Hey, Bob, you want some coffee, man?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, you can pour me a cup. That's great. Yeah, thank you. Oh, we got company, Bruce. Whoa.
God, I hate it when they sneak up
I
on you
know.
like that. All right.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, let's get something more comfortable.
Let's see.
If we didn't change seats, we wouldn't be able to walk tomorrow. Can't forget my cup of coffee.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Yeah. Wow. Almost got a full house here.
You know, I realize this is a school night, too, so it's extra effort. And I also realize that VCA is now offering free admission this month to kids 18 and under, which is a very generous thing to do. And I did see a few kids, so I think Bob and I would agree that this bike ride was an idea. It was maybe not a great idea, but parental guidance involved for any youth that think that this might be something they want to do. Just think long and hard about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, I realized that this is like it was last time. This was Talks on the Rock. And you're used to, marine biology or art history. And this is a little lower brow than that. So maybe this is Jocks on the Rock, Bob? I don't know. Okay. But before we go here, there was a slight update in the lobby that I've been encouraged to talk about, and that a lot of people who walked in here asked me right away, asked Bob, asked Lynn Ann, asked Chrissy, hey, are these paintings for sale? And we're not selling them because we have a chance to do this again somewhere else. And last time we did this, all the paintings disappeared, and that was it. That was the show. It's completely over. So some people were thankful to that, but some people say, hey, sell prints. So we're going to sell prints instead. And I think it's $75 a print, and all you have to do is there's a sign up out there if you're so inclined to do this. Once again, that's just an idea. And you just put your name down and write that each painting has a title, and put whether it's Bob or me, because some of the titles cross, and that's it. And sign up, and we'd be happy to. We'll get them printed. I got a commercial printer, and we'll print them and mat them and sign them and get them to you. Okay? All right. Note straight here. Oh yeah, the clicker. Don't forget the clicker. Yeah. Okay. So, as we mentioned, let's see if this is going to work for me here. Yeah. 6 years ago, we were on this stage again, and we had just completed what they typically call the Northern Tier, which is a road bike ride. I guess I should get so I can see this kind of. It's a road bike ride. It was 4,300 miles long, and for the entire crossing, it was only about 28,000 feet of vertical, something like that, which in the time seemed like it was a lot of hills to me. I don't know about you, Bob.
Yeah.
And then about 2 years ago, Bob approached me and said, how about you and I get a couple of sharp-looking, let's see, whoops, back, sorry, jumping, there. Said, how about you and I get a couple of sharp-looking haircuts and then try to ride from the Canada border down to the Mexico border? And that's what this started. This is your baby.
Yeah, I had read about this route, and it intrigued me because on the first ride that we did, it was they were all. I think by the end of the trip, Bruce and I were both tired of cars behind us the whole time. And one of the things that really intrigued me about this ride was it was off-road, and it was in beautiful terrain the whole time. The
There was a startling difference to this ride, though.
There was a big difference.
Right.
Number one, it was being off-road. It was, Canada to Mexico on the Continental Divide the whole time. I think we crossed it around 32 times, but it was not. I mean, some of it was road, but most of it was on gravel. But the key difference was the mileage. The first trip was 4,300 miles across. This was 2,700, which a good bit less. But the trick was the vertical elevation gain on the first trip was 27,000 feet. This was 200,000 feet vertical, which is a big difference.
There was an unbelievable amount of stuff to learn about this trip. There was equipment to buy. There were techniques to learn. Bob and I are experienced road riders. We're not really experienced off-road riders. There was a lot to learn, and then more than just that, and the kind of food you get, and all this kind of stuff. Probably the biggest trick here was 2 days in, we realized that we'd learned a lot about actually riding on that route. And it was kind of like a code of the off-road riding. And to help communicate that for this presentation, we sort of talked about a set of nine trail tips. And as we go through the presentation here, we'll hit each one of these tips. And tip number one was, despite 2 years of planning and so on, plans are great, but
the major tip of this whole trip, and we found out this the first day of the trip, was never be complacent about planning. I mean, no sooner did we make plans than they were broken. And conditions changed daily or by the minute. In fact, the first day of the trip, because there was bear activity and forest fires, we ended up having to change our first day route. I mean, that was classic.
It is a wake-up call to be on your first night in the wild and be told at the last second, no, you can't camp there. There's way too many grizzlies. It's like, that's a good point. Yeah, we'll skip that one.
It got our attention.
Right.
Yeah.
Tip number two.
Yeah.
Tip number two of this ride is it's a party out there. It's remarkable. There are people everywhere. And the biggest part of this tip is that the people you meet become really important later on, and you count on them. You want to hit a few of these names?
Yeah, I mean, this gentleman sitting next to Bruce here, this is Harold from Oslo, and we actually met him on the first day of the trip when we were in Eureka, and there's this other couple's from Ontario, and we rode with them for 3 or 4 days. And
I would say that tip number 3 here, and then we'll move on, but tip number 3 is that the people you meet on the trail rarely turn out to be the people you think they are initially, and it's almost always for the better. So we criss our cross. So within Eureka, which is like, 20 miles into the ride?
Yep.
We stopped at a restaurant. We realized, my God, we have been at this restaurant 6 years before when we were riding across the country. We're only 20 miles in, and we've crissed it. So let's go into, what was it called?
What the
Jack's.
name? Jack's restaurant.
Yeah. And so we're waiting out in front of Jack's, and there's a big mob scene there, and we're never going to get a seat here. And there are these 2 really big motorcycle dudes, and we're all kind of jammed together. And the waitress who'd had it up to here with people like us came up to us and said, "Look, you can eat if you sit with these 2 guys." And the table was about as big as this, and there are these 2 monsters. So we sit down with them. Whoops.
Oh, hey, where'd you go? There he is.
We sat with him. So at first I was a little intimidated. When the conversation gets going,
you're gonna love this.
He says that what do you do for a living? I said, well, I'm an illustrator, and Bob's a landscape architect. It's like, what do you do? And I'm waiting for this kind of thing. Does he sell chain or something for a living? And he looks at us and says, I'm in the marshmallow peep business.
And just a soft-spoken guy that was so polite. He was great.
You can't tell who you're going to meet out there. It's the best part of the thing. All right. Yeah. So then we're thinking, well, obviously the key part of this ride is the notion of the Continental Divide. And I'm in elementary school. I think they started talking about Continental Divide. So I thought, well, what is it? Do I have this right? So I looked at the Wikipedia to get a grip on this.
That's a good start.
And sure enough, it was this really lively, florid explanation. It's a drainage divide on a continent such that the drainage on one side of the divide feeds into one ocean or sea, and the drainage on the other side of the divide feeds into a separate ocean or sea. Unless, oh, this is an important unless the Continental Divide meets an endorheic basin, such as, literally stated in the Wikipedia, such as the Great Divide Basin of Wyoming. I had no idea what the hell an endorheic basin was.
We find out about that later.
Yeah, we do. So we really were wondering, you know, we've heard that the Great Divide ride, which is obviously slightly different than the Continental Divide, the physical phenomena, is what is this Great Divide ride like? And we looked at YouTubes and that kind of stuff, and we've heard that it's the longest off-road ride, sanctioned ride. And like Bob said, it crosses the Continental Divide 32 times along the way. But what was it like? So we found out. And why don't you take us through these things, Bob?
Well, about 8% of the route is on pavement like this. So there was some of that. And then about 80% of it is on gravel. But gravel is a big term. I mean, from fine gravel to this, like this, to this kind of gravel.
That's considered gravel. I don't know.
And that's, so, yeah.
And then about, interestingly enough, whoops, that's not supposed to do that. Sorry, we're having clicker problems here. And about 5% of the ride is on single track. And single track filming is a handful when you don't have a GoPro or you don't have a drone and you're new to this.
We don't have too many videos like this
and that
from
is
the trip.
Worth noting that a lot of the videos are, God, am I going to make it here?
Yeah.
A lot of the videos are of this kind of more road-like or wide-open gravel, and that's not because that was the majority of the road. It's because I could actually hold onto the phone and steer and not die in the process. But it did lead to all kinds of beautiful passes like this, where you really sort of pinch yourself. Is this, wow, we're getting a ride here.
Yeah, on some of these rides, it would have been handy to have had a mountain bike. You know, it was a little dicey. But
if you had listened to some of the radio programming too that Jeff Hoyt put together, we mentioned, apparently more often than not, we mentioned square potatoes, and everyone said, "What are square potatoes?" This is what square potatoes are. Yeah. And one of the things that is unfortunate about the filmic part of this is. This is preposterously steep.
That looks flat.
Right. There's no. I realize it looks flat, but it's preposterously steep. There's no way you can ride it. Even the mountain bikers were getting off for this thing. So this sounds like we're sandbagging, but it is very difficult. And then about, I think I said 1/10% of the ride looked like this. Yeah. Which is
like a stream bed, basically. Yeah.
Whoops. It's a little tricky. No, that's not what I want. Come on. Nope. It's not going to do it, I guess. Okay. So we'll skip ahead. Hopefully we don't get that the rest of the way. Actually, let's back up to that. Yeah. So what I want to talk about here is actually what our bikes are. You want to run us through the differences in our bikes?
Yeah, the bikes are... They're called gravel bikes, sort of a cross between a road bike and a mountain bike. They don't have suspension like a mountain bike does. They're a little more stretched out proportionally than a mountain bike. But the trick is they're able to carry a lot of gear, a lot of attachments on the bikes. I mean, we ended up carrying about 40 to 50 pounds of gear strapped onto the bike. So we were around 80 pounds of bike typically.
And mountain bikes are typically you're riding with very little, or mountain bike riders often put it on their back. We definitely did that. So these bikes are better for a long haul, a long ride, and they're very strong and they carry a lot of weight. But there are a lot of times where we wish we'd had a different bike. If anyone's interested in bikes, we'll cover that another time. Yeah. But there's a lot to talk about that kind of thing. We learned as we went.
But we did rig the bikes pretty much just as they were on the trip for what you see on the stage here.
This is true. Yeah. Although I have to admit, the bags in mine are full of my underwear, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So about 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6 nights, we slept out. We were in tents somewhere. And sometimes the campsites were a beauty, like this, where you got a great little water source nearby, and it's absolutely beautiful. This one's extremely remote. There's just nothing anywhere near.
And we
us
would
here.
try to plan ahead. In most nights, we were staying at the place that we planned on, but you never. That
you're
that
just
did
winging
change.
it. And then some nights, the campsites would be like this. Now, this is the kind of campsite I was embarrassed
Yeah,
to stay in
exactly.
most of my life. It's like there's a picnic table.
But a picnic table was the best. I mean, to be able to get a picnic table and a bear box, that was good.
If you look in the upper right, just above the saddle on my bike there's a metal can. That's a bear box, and that locks, and you can put all your food and everything else in there, and it gives you a lot of comfort. And then this is the part that really sort of startled me that I would come to revere these things. Oops, that's not supposed to go yet. Yeah, these.
There you go. The loo. Yeah.
I thought this was the biggest joke in camping, and we love these things.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And especially in Montana, there were a lot. The state parks were so well laid out, and we had a lot of camping grounds that had these kind of facilities.
And
It was
talk
great.
about embarrassment. Now, this has got to work. I guess it has to take a second to load. Sometimes you end up in places that you really don't let my friends see me here, but we just have to, come on. Work.
Hey, Bob, where are you camping tonight? K-O-A.
So after you've been on the trail, and this was about a 98-degree day,
So this is
you
in
just can't be more thrilled about this.
yeah. This is in Butte, Montana,
Look at our
and
part of
neighbors, how
this
close
is-
they are.
Well, our campsite has a view of the pool.
view of the pool. Doesn't get much any better than that.
No, it
I
doesn't.
tell you.
So about 1 out of every 5 or 1 out of every 6 nights, we were staying in places like this.
Yeah.
Just little cheap motels.
Yeah.
And there is such a variety of these kinds of spots along the way, and a chance to get a real shower.
Anything that's got a shower and a bed.
Yeah, and something to work on your bike a little bit and that sort of thing. The other big issue out there is food. That opportunities to buy food is often 4 days apart, and you're burning a huge amount of calories, and food weighs a lot. So you're playing this game of like you want to carry as little as food as you want, but you don't want to, and if you lose your food to animals, then you're in real trouble.
Yeah.
So you play a real wild game with this kind of thing.
Yeah, and you have to plan ahead. You
And liquor.
you have to plan ahead, knowing that you're not going to have a food stop for 4 days.
Oh, darn it.
And oops, and the food stops could be a grocery store, or it could be a little convenience store with just Skittles. You never know.
The topic you hear a lot about how rural communities are underserved by food. Boy, we can report on that. You can. I don't eat beef jerky, and usually in my life,
Yeah.
I ate tons of beef jerky on the trail. I could not get enough of it.
Yeah.
Beef
Protein.
jerky and oatmeal. You can get a lot of miles on that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
But it didn't get
then-
any better than this.
Every once in a while, you get a meal like this.
Hey, bud.
You would live for those moments.
Okay, but before we get rolling into the kind of the route we took and those sorts of things, I just wanted to share a couple of kind of unexpected thoughts, and I'm sure Bob shares these too, about the photographs we took and the paintings we made. The scenery was so big, so huge and immense that I quickly found that I had a hard time finding anything worth painting, which you sort of strikes you as like, that's kind of odd. It's the most beautiful country I've seen.
There was very little reference for,
Right.
you couldn't see the distances, or just it was hard to capture.
Yeah, you've seen
It
our
really
little
was.
paintings out there,
Yeah.
and there's one that did the best job for me of capturing what it was like to be in these giant open immensities, and watch people walk by. It's like, skip it, move on, because it is not impressive. It's very hard to deal with.
But the
that.
typical thing that we were in every day was something like this, where there was nothing but just the trail, us, and the scenery. It was we were just out there, not even barbed wire, nothing.
This
know,
is
just,
the morning of the second day, so it's just immediately jump. You're in. You're way in right away. This is where we were told to keep moving because of the grizzly bears too.
Yeah.
All right, so different thing. Before I start showing a bunch of slides of progressive of how we want to stop, because I know I'll forget this later on.
Thanks,
and want to thank some people, and very much wanted to thank Julie, my wife, my daughter Madeline, and her fiance Scott, and Kathleen and Nell for the support on this ride. This has just been, it was kind of a crazy thing to do, and it's quite self-indulgent on our part, and you made it happen. So thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also want to thank Jeff Hoyt for doing the radio show with KBSH. We did the radio show with him on the first trip, and we did it again this trip. We had weekly interviews with him, and he was great. He pulled it off, and we really enjoyed that. And then also two close friends that joined us on the trip, Scott Englehart and Jeff Good, who provided great company and a nice respite on the trip. So
yeah, we'll get back to them soon here. So let's hit you with kind of what life on the Divide is really like. And it rotated through a pattern the entire way along. The first thing I would say is that there's something that we would call the Green Tunnel, and that you find yourself, this is our third day out, and one of the passes that we covered, and you're just riding down this perpetual green tunnel. And then, all of a sudden, maybe 40, 50 miles later, you come across this.
That's right. Actually, that shot that you just had, that was the only time we used bug dope on the whole trip, I believe, wasn't it?
I used
and
half
they ate us alive that night.
Yeah, I used half my supply of bug dope, and I thought, whoa, this is not going to go well.
Yeah.
And it's literally the last time either one of us used it, the entire trip. Amazing.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, all of a sudden, you're out in this incredible sort of prairie. This is a woman's backyard, just offered us to camp there.
This is outside of Whitefish,
Yeah, just
Montana.
spectacular. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're right back into the green tunnel. And this just gets repeated again and again and again. But really, as you're going back and forth, like these slides will show you that you keep going back from green tunnel, prairie, or openness, green tunnel, back and forth, back and forth. And along the way, the whole show is worthwhile because of the people you meet.
Go back one.
Oops. Yeah, this is just advancing. Oh, it's all a little lonesome.
So
I literally stand up from that seat and turn around and take a picture of Bob here.
So Bruce and I are painting on the side of the trail, and these two guys come by. Believe it or not, their names are Bruce and Bob. And they're riding the exact same bikes that we're riding. And their Bruce was from Massachusetts also. It was unbelievable. So yeah.
Yeah, the accent.
And we thought, no, this couldn't be real. Seriously.
It is, and then as soon as we're done with this incredibly wonderful connection, then all of a sudden we're back to this kind of green tunnel, prairie green tunnel.
This was typical at nights in Montana. We typically camped by lakes. That was a lot of climbing, passes, that sort of thing during the day, but we would typically have lake camping.
Really dusty roads and hot, miserable. Montana was a blur of high 90s the entire time, and it just goes on and on and on. And then all of a sudden we'd encounter something like this, once again, where you have to realize that the plans totally change. Yeah. And your route that you thought was going to work out, all of a sudden is the last thing in the world you want to do.
Yeah, and we thought this was going to be a showstopper, but we were able to carry it right on through, right after this, yeah.
And we're talking about feeling dusty and looking for a lake to jump in. And literally just a couple hours after this, we encounter these two people. This is
Felicia and Felicia and Benny. They were from Germany, and just a delightful couple. And we ended up having lunch with them at this little stop in Overton, Montana. And Felicia really tickled me. She said, because she was just sort of blown away by the immense landscape in the States compared to Europe. And she said, now I understand why Americans drive trucks. She said, not only do they drive trucks, but I see trucks pulling trucks, and trucks pulling trailers with trucks on the trailers, you know? She was really...
She also, it's one of those just delightful couple. They were both so very upfront and genuine. And they were talking about, well, we have been married for a year now. And Felicia said, and I am a little worried. It's like, well, what's the problem? She goes like, I think Benny and I are running out of things to say to each other. Oh, Felicia, you're going to be okay, believe me.
Benny was looking at his shoes the whole time.
So, and then we start talking about, because of where this town is, this is Overton, and we got telling bear stories. And she had admitted that they actually spent the night in that place that we had to move on because there were too many grizzly bears. And she didn't they got there late, and they didn't realize that they were going to be in trouble there. And then she admitted to trying to spend the night herself, climb in the bear box and have Benny close her in. But I guess that didn't work out. But this is, before the trip, how many people contacted us about this?
Oh, my gosh, so many, yeah. I mean,
like 20, 30
at least
people?
20, 30 people.
And they said, have you...
Everybody read about this article. It was a New York Times article about a fatality in Overton.
Right, in this town of Overton. There was a grizzly bear. And if you were a reader
It was the year before, I believe.
Yeah, and that it was just like... And so, of course, people hear you're going to go on this trip, and the first thing they want to do is ask you about, like, have you heard that the woman got eaten by the grizzly on your trip? It's like, great.
Just about everybody we talked to wanted to let us know of this story. Yeah.
And everyone kind of tries to at first play like, well, we'll be fine, everything's cool, that kind of thing. But this brings up tip number 4 for riding the divide. And tip number 4 is that turns out everyone out there is thinking about bears.
Everybody's thinking about bears.
Everybody. And you talk to like the neophytes like Bob and me and Felicia and Benny, and they're thinking about bears. And then you talk to the old-timer who was selling us the ice cream cones in here. He's thinking about bears. Everybody in town is thinking about bears. Yep. And you realize this is a constant thought. It's on everyone's mind, bears. And you take it really seriously. And you don't mess around. It's not a huge danger. It really isn't. There are things that are probably the trucks that were passing us on our cross-country ride are far more dangerous than bears, but you pay attention to them, just like you do the trucks.
You pay attention, and what we did on the entire ride when we were in grizzly country is we would make noises. Each of us had our own little bear call.
Yeah.
Bruce's was what?
Well, yeah, this is, when you were a kid, every boy has a machine gun noise, and every girl has a horse whinny kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, everybody on the Great Divide has their, hey, bark, bark, bark.
And mine was yip, 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 yip.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this goes on the entire day. That you're just, we had bear bells on the bike, and you're yip, yipping, and, But the thing is, just about every turn that you're making, these are blind turns, so you don't know what you're going to be coming on. The last thing you want to do is surprise a bear. Actually, we didn't... I think because of all the calling that we did, we never saw a bear. And we actually didn't see a whole lot of other large wildlife because of that, I think. We scared everything away in our path.
It's funny, a lot of people have asked me, well, did you see a bear? It's like, no. And they're like, oh, too bad. It's like, no.
We were just fine with that.
You don't want,
just
I've
fine
seen
with
plenty
that.
of bears in my life, and you don't want to see a grizzly bear when you're on your little bicycle. It's just, you don't want to do that. So we made noise, and we managed to avoid the whole thing. Next thing to talk about here is, I think it was day 8 by the time we actually crossed the divide, because the trail here was just paralleling the divide. And we get to, there, now let's see if this will load. And there we go. The divide just isn't, this is crossing the divide.
This is typical of many of the passes.
I pictured this ragged mountaintop, and you could like look south, and you could see this ridge that kind of went over hill and dale, and that this would be the divide, and you'd keep crossing back and forth. That is not what the Continental Divide looks like at all.
I mean, there were typically steep climbs to get up to this point, but this was more of a typical pass. It really was a typical divide at the passes
really
like
plays
this.
in.
Very open, prairie-like this.
Later on, too. And about 4 of these passes later, we got to the place that everyone kept talking about. Everyone kept saying, oh, you're going to stop at the llama ranch. You're going to stop at the llama ranch, right? And it's like, yeah, okay. And llama ranch was worth stopping at.
There were several of these places along the route that just catered to bike riders.
There are cows everywhere. So we needed a day off, and Bob had to catch up on his paintings. So we let him get situated here, And this was the greatest spot in the world. It's a chance to get a shower. Oh, pardon us. And this is about that far in, about halfway through Montana at this point. And this is run by a wonderful couple. It's just kind of a claptrap of odd little shanty things that he's put together, he and she. And this is John and Barbara.
Just a sweet couple, and yeah, they didn't charge for anything. It was just totally generous.
They had food for us. They had
food,
beverages.
Yeah. We stayed in a little cabin.
And if you tried to give them money, they simply just give it back.
And I think they had a going record of how many days with people that were staying there.
Yeah, I can't. We showed up late in the day, and they were really thankful to see us because looked like we were going to be they were going to miss a day of people there. And they just had that.
Yeah.
I think that movie, Pay It Forward, they very much lived by that, and it was the spirit that we wanted to capture. Let's see.
Yeah, that's a little cabin that we stayed in there.
Yeah, first indoor night in a long time.
Yeah.
Then right back into the Green Tunnel again.
Yeah.
And this is now moving down through Montana, and Montana very much became this routine of these beautiful little single tracks, and then all of a sudden they would spill out into these
big
just
open,
gobsmacking open scenes, and you could look forward for, you can't see it in these slides, but you can see your trail way off into the distant places. There's so few paths that it's really easy to see where you're going to end up. It's just absolutely incredibly beautiful. And each time one of these passes opens up like this, they tend to get bigger. And we realized Montana kept kind of growing in immensity. One of the most famous passes this is called Fleecer Ridge. And in terms of a sense of just hugeness and just endlessness, and it was a long slog up to get to the top of this
Yeah, this is on top
thing.
of the ridge.
Yeah.
It took a long time to get up there. We had to walk our bikes up.
Right.
And ended up having to walk them down, too. But look at this is...
Right.
Now, I think you get a little bit of the sense of the steepness of this. But, so the trick of that is hands on the brakes, because you are braking the bike the whole time. Or it's just, yeah. And there were several of these. I mean, this happened fairly often.
This is a place where not even the mountain bikists weren't riding down this one. Everyone got off and walked this. Yep. This is famous. It's called Fleecer Ridge.
Yep.
Another spot after Fleecer Ridge, and kind of a tight confine, then it gets even bigger and bigger and bigger.
This was one of the most beautiful spots for me on the whole trip. It's called Grasshopper Valley. Yeah. Just spectacular.
And it lived up to its name, that you would be riding along and the grasshoppers are bouncing all over you. They're just ricocheting off your legs.
Yeah.
This is the sort of the home. I didn't know there was one, but there was a Montana gold rush. Yeah, and this was the spot that it all took place. But this day turned from this incredible Emerald Valley, and then all of a sudden, it turned into this, which was our first encounter with real desert. Oh, no, that's not what I want you to do. I guess some of these things are just not going to work. Okay, forget it. And after a long pull down that very long, hard desert, it was the first time I was actually really scared.
We were out without water, and it got a little scary there at the end of the day. We ended up in this little town called Grant, and ended up having to find a little water spigot behind a old school,
an abandoned school. Yeah.
And it allowed us to carry on for another couple of hours, and we ended up finding this place. It was like a little oasis, and this place was amazing. This was so typical of the generosity that we found on the trip with a lot of the people that we met. But this was a huge ranch, and we didn't realize it when we were there how large this ranch was. But this was sort of one of their stop points where all the ranch hands stayed. And there was nobody there when we rode up. And this was late. This is like 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. No one there. There was a sign that said, for $10 you can have a shower, tent camp, a towel, electrical hookups, and which was just, that was just godsend at that time. And we never saw anybody.
Yeah, the next morning
never
we get
saw
out
anybody.
and just pedal off, and the place is empty. This is Hanson Ranch, and it's obviously a couple 100,000 acres. It went on for miles and miles. I mean, literally like 50 miles. And it's an immense place. And yet, I mean, these people are in the cow business, not the cyclist business, and yet they were extending themselves and creating this environment that allowed us to press on. So we never met anyone. We did some paintings of this, and I'm trying to find the owner, so I just wanted to mail them the painting when it's all done. Let's see, this one's got to work. And we're just plowing off into this incredibly open environment.
This is pretty typical. You see the little, I think that was a deer that crossed the road there, but this is pretty typical. You could see for miles how far you would be, where you would be in a couple of hours. You could see on many of these roads.
This day was a little different, though, in that we get down and we get towards a canyon, and we are chased down the canyon by our first really violent storm. And we suited up, and we were getting pushed hard down this canyon. Like, we're just going gangbusters trying to stay ahead of this thing. We round a turn, and it's coming up the other side of the valley, and we're just hammered by this. So we press on into this storm for a while, and we find, you can see the canyon up off to the right there, and we press down this and find this kind of godforsaken campground.
It was a pretty dicey campground, and so we were completely soaked and chilled to the bone. So we saw this loo with a roof and an opportunity to maybe make a cup of coffee and sort of get our act together. So that's what we're doing here.
These concrete toilets work in a lot of different ways. So we're there, we're huddled in there, and Bob's making us coffee, and this guy pulls up, and he backs his red pickup truck right up to where we're making coffee, and we kind of like, well, hi, and he sticks out his hand and says, hi, I'm Kevin. It's like, oh, hey, Kevin, how you doing? And we're talking back and forth, and he says, what are you guys doing? And we're like, we're riding the Great Divide. It's like, really, what's that? And he said, where did you start from? Where are you going? All that kind of stuff, and he's going back, he's like, wow, I'm really impressed with what you're doing. You could tell he was honestly like, you guys are doing that? That's wow. And he was moved. And then he eventually said, you know what? I want to make, and we thought, what are you actually doing here? And he said, oh, I clean the toilets.
This is like after 30 to 45 minutes talking to him,
right.
too. I mean,
I have a route of these outback, these remote toilets, and
Yeah.
he's the guy who goes around and cleans them out and that kind of stuff. And so he did his job, and then we're still standing there, waiting, drinking our coffee, and he approaches me, and he says, I'm really impressed with what you're doing, and I want to make a contribution. So I'm thinking, wow, and he reaches out and hands me a roll of toilet paper.
we did not laugh either.
You needed it.
It was appreciated. I think we actually needed the toilet paper. Yeah.
So this is the point where Scott Englehart
So
joins
Scott
us.
Englehart and Jeff Good joined us at this point in Lima, and that road right there, I believe that's the one that.
It's the old lake bed.
It was a lake bed, and it turned into, there was a portion of that was like quicksand. I remember Jeff got really stuck in it because he had a thinner tire, but that was kind of tough going. But it was good having Jeff and Scott join us for a weekend.
The best thing
or so.
about Jeff and Scott is they came in a van, and the van came with food.
Food.
And they cooked us breakfasts and dinners and
So
lots
there was
of
one
different things.
rule that we couldn't ride in the van, but we could sit in the van.
That's right. right.
We could eat in the van, but we couldn't ride in the van.
If it was raining, we could
Yeah,
sit in the
exactly.
van. I was never allowed in there during the daylight.
So it was really nice to have food at the end of the day and a cold beer at the end of the day. This was pretty sweet for
Sometimes
a week
the
and a half.
van literally followed us on the gravel road, and sometimes the gravel road disappeared and turned to single track, and the van had to find its own way, and then we'd find a rendezvous point and catch up again. And some of these single tracks were just fantastic.
Yeah, this is
Beautiful. We
a
entered
steep canyon that we ended up descending.
really
here.
kind of a wonderful
Yeah.
gorge. This is a good example of bear threat, where this was an old rail track down along a gorge, and you get flying down this thing. Flying on a gravel bike is like 25 miles an hour, and you're down these steep gorges, and you're moving, and you realize you can't scare a bear. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
But this did lead us to a campground that ends up being a really important reunion for
Well,
us.
we ended up at this little campground, and Harold, who we met initially in Eureka, and rode with him for a while. We joined him and Dan Worthington, this guy on the far right from the UK, and we ended up riding with them for what, 4 or 5.
Oh, I think longer than
like
that.
a week,
yeah.
week
yeah.
and a half almost.
And these
And just
friendships,
had a great time with them.
within a couple of days, you make these unbelievably tight friendships. Like you feel like you've known them for months at this point. This was really wonderfully important. Then the very next day, we bump into this guy. And his bike is lying in the dirt, and he's kind of standing there dazed like, and he looked to me like he was dressed up to be an extra in Star Wars or something.
This is Odin Wallace. This guy's apparently famous. He was doing three runs on the Great Divide, and he was on his third turn. He was heading north on his third turn, and we just said, "Are you serious? Are you what?" I mean, so after we got back from the trip, Bruce did a little research.
Yeah, he's the kind of a guy that gives you like a 5-minute core dump of his entire life, and you find out about all his GI tract issues and so on. And then he said he was moving north. We thought I didn't really believe him, so I did. When he got back, I checked out, and this was his blog post a couple weeks after we saw him.
Yeah.
He was heading north, and he finished it out in these conditions. Really kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
We did not head north. We headed south, which was a much better prospect.
Yeah, this is about as close as we got to to Yellowstone and the Teton National Park. This was camping on the Snake River.
We knew we were closing in on the Tetons, but we knew we were coming up from behind them. And then all of a sudden, we've pressing on for days, and then that morning we get up and start riding, and then boom, there are the Tetons. And the Tetons are with us for, it seems like, days afterwards. And where everything is so tight, and then all of a sudden, you're just riding along, and then they're always there. And you're always looking over your shoulder and seeing, like, are they there? Are they there? Are they still there? And we would stop every once in a while and get a painting in. There are a couple of paintings out in the lobby that look just like this. Pretty magical spot.
Yeah.
Here's about where we are on the trip right now. We're well into Wyoming, which was really fantastic country. Pretty wild. Some of the most wild places we were at. And this is where Harold and Dan had to leave us. They were going down to Jackson to have some fancy bike repairs, and we went into the mountains. And
the mountains we went into, because there were 5 ranges that we were skirting at this point. There were the Wind River, the Gros Ventre, the Burnt, the Smokehouse, and the Green Mountains. And we were sort of between these ranges for several days. It's nice, a lot of steep climbing and just spectacular views.
And really bad roads, too.
Yeah.
Really difficult trails and paths. And once again, you're seeing the best of it because I can hold the camera at that point. And this is where there were signs on the road, that little chunk of highway we were on, before we turned off onto this road, which then gets into nothing. These signs were very clear: don't stop for the grizzly bears. Because there's so many bears around here that there's a problem where people keep stopping and looking at the bears and interacting with the bears. It doesn't work out so well. So we were hyper aware of bears. And like we said, we never actually stood there and looked at a bear, but we did have one interesting exchange in the morning where you can see a grizzly bear track as different from a black bear track.
Really
There's
evident.
A pattern of toes, a more straight across pattern and size, and that's a classic grizzly, and you can see the toenail marks above it, and that's a classic grizzly track. And this was interesting because that morning, a couple that we'd gotten to know left the camp before us, like 15 minutes before us.
20 minutes before us, yeah.
And you get to know people's tire tracks on the trail. And Rex, you could see his tire track because his front tire and his back tire were different. So I could recognize his tire track. And as we're going along, all of a sudden, I began to realize that the grizzly tracks end up walking on top
of his track.
His track, which means if he's 10 minutes ahead of us, so we got this procession of Rex and whatever her name was, and the grizzly, and then us.
And the bears were watching us, I'm sure.
And we're all in the green tunnel,
from their
moving
cover.
along together. Yeah. It was this reminder of like, you have to take this seriously. Now this is where the photographs really kind of let you down. This was, I thought, probably the most impressive place I'd seen, and we worked very hard to get to this spot. It was a long slog over several ranges. It's windy up here, which is you can hear.
Yeah.
And this is where you can see the 5 different mountain ranges that you mentioned. and all combining. And I don't think I've ever had kind of a bigger feeling in my life than here. Those mountains in the distance are called the Gros Ventre, and they figure in very soon. And just to be able to stand up there and look around is incredible.
We pretty quickly realized that the beauty of any spot was sort of inversely proportional to the difficulty that it took to get there, you know.
This is tip number 5.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
official tip number
Yeah.
5. And it is so true. In fact, if you're really dying on the trail, there would be a little mantra. Remember tip number 5. If you're hurting now, it's going to be very beautiful.
It's
going
gonna be
It's going to be worth your
gonna be
effort to
beautiful.
get there. So I mentioned the Gros Ventre, and when you get onto the other side of that Gros Ventre, we had an interesting experience. Back down by Jackson Lake, we're looking at the maps, and somebody said, "Oh, look, here's Big Jenny Lake." And this bulb went off in my head, somewhere in the back of my frog brain, and Jenny Lake, Jenny Lake. And I said, Big Jenny. And it took me a while. I was like, oh, Little Jenny. I'm reminded of a college friend who owns a ranch called the Little Jenny Ranch, and it's out here by Jackson. So we call him up.
You had no idea how close it was to where we were.
Yeah,
at the
it's
time
incredible.
either.
And so we're just 2 days away, and we went to Little Jenny Ranch. This is Little Jenny Ranch on the other side.
This place was spectacular. It was a real deal ranch. It was 3,000 acres of ranch land, and it was about 3,000 head of cattle.
In the summertime, they rent out 175,000 acres. This is the real thing. It's not a dude ranch.
We took a day off here.
This is Faith and Mark. Mark is a college buddy of mine, and they run as a family this ranch. This is the little guest cottage that the 4 of us, that's including still Jeff and Scott, and we're all in this little ranch house together. And right now, I was just talking with Mark a couple days ago, and he sent me this picture of this is what it looks like right now. And they still have about 3 to 4 feet of snow, and this is a real ranch. This is 3,000 head, and it's calving season. And Mark said that they're shooting for 900 calves right now, and dealing with 3 feet of snow at the same time. I was very impressed. And the spirit of generosity was just incredible.
Yeah.
So they offered us dinner that night at their house. I have never eaten that much meat in my life.
Yeah, the meat was amazing.
It's like we had these big
burgers,
beef things, yeah.
big sausage
With sausage before.
Had
That was the hors
everything,
d'oeuvre,
yeah.
was sausage for your burger.
Great.
I don't eat a lot of meat.
Really good.
I was
Yeah.
way out of my element. And then it gets dark, and then you wander back to your little cabin there. And this is ranch stuff, and there's cowboys there. And, there's some funny things. So this is a staged photo of their idea of funny. There is a stuffed cougar that they then place somewhere on your path back to the ranch to see how badly
Had
you're.
to take that shot.
And then the next day, when you mention, it's like, does anyone know about the joke about the cougar? And it's like, no, I don't know anything about that.
So these ranch hands were the most polite, respectful group of people. I mean, we got yes sir'd and no sir'd so much. It got to be uncomfortable. It's like, you guys don't really need to.
There's
call
a
me
code
sir.
there that
You
was very impressive. And
Yeah.
one of the interesting things is, so this is the following day. This is 40 miles away, and it is a place called Boulder, Wyoming. And you've gone from this incredibly sweet-hearted, tough guy cowboy world. This is gas and oil range, and these are all the roughnecks that hang out here, a really tough group that wasn't particularly friendly. And in between at the 20-mile mark was this town called Pinedale, which is sort of the
It's just
Bellingham of...
Yeah, sort of a mecca for outdoor recreation.
Right. So it is
All the
Subarus.
backpacking stores, that kind of thing.
And so it's just inside of 40 miles, you have these vastly different communities. Really kind of remarkable. So now comes a big change, a very important change, too.
This is what Scott said Mordor was approaching, right?
Right.
Mordor, yeah.
So this is the start of what's called the Great Basin. And the Great Basin's officially 2 days of riding, about 150 miles. And it is more like 5 days, though, without any shade anywhere at all and no water.
Yeah.
And so you're very, very careful here. In fact, going into this, we're practicing with carrying extra water on the bike, literally like 25 or 30 pounds of water on the bike to see if we can get through here. You may not need it at all, but if you get a mechanical failure or something, you're in real trouble.
And 25 pounds is a lot of water to be carrying on the bike.
It's like
it was
having
hard to strap it on the bike.
It's like having a
have it
toddler
hold
on the back
Yeah.
seat of your bike going, wow,
Yeah.
this is great.
And you probably wouldn't need it, but if you needed it, you would need it really bad. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So tip number 6 is everyone is worried about the Great Basin. When you talk to fellow riders, everyone's like, hey, have you done the basin yet? What's your plan for the basin? How much water are you going to carry in the basin? How many pounds of water are you going to carry? It's on everyone's mind. And that's because the Great Basin is a really big deal. It is about the hardest thing I've ever ridden, and there are not many hills out here.
And it was hot when we were there too. The heat was
well into 100s.
Was well into the hundreds. Yeah.
So we had heard, this is funny communication with occasional text message, we'd heard that Dan and Harold were coming up on us. And that if we were coordinating, they were riding hard to see if they could catch up with us, that we might be able to hook up with them to ride the Divide. You want more company. And sure enough, late in the evening of the night before we were going to ride the Divide, Dan and Harold show up and bring a friend, Brian, with them. And we all,
So
the next morning,
there are 5 of us at the campground that night. And we all decided that in order to do the basin and to do it in a safe way, that it made sense to get up early and to not be riding late in the afternoon, but to get a good portion of our riding done at night. So we decided to set our alarms for 3 a.m. And so we pushed off from our campsites at 3 a.m. with our headlamps on and pushed off into the dark.
It was remarkable to ride along, and your headlamp doesn't give you much, and to sort of try to find your way around by looking up, and you could see the Milky Way, and you could kind of steer yourself by the direction of the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is absolutely spectacularly brilliant. I took this photo right before we turned off our headlamps. One last little go before we turn off the headlamps.
This was probably the most amazing experience for me of the trip. Yeah. It was incredible.
The thing that really struck me here was as the sun finally started to edge and give you that red edge, there's this funny feeling. I've seen it on the ocean if you're on a boat and it's dawn. There's a funny feeling of like doming, like you're kind of at the top of a lump, but you're not. It's flat, but you have this sense, and then when you watch the sun light up that red edge and it gets brighter and brighter, you really have a sense that somehow you're on this ball that is rotating towards the sun. You actually kind of sense the earth is turning. It's just absolutely profound, kind of almost, tear-creating beauty to the whole thing.
And then the sunrise, oh my God.
Yeah, we slugged it out here for a long time. And then all day long, you ride, took very few pictures.
We ended up stopping at this little reservoir, and no shade at all. Again, it's in the high 90s, low hundreds, and we arrived at this about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, set our tents up, and so what do you do?
It was
What
actually
do you do?
It was actually 1 o'clock. You're looking. It's sundown is 9.
And so we, 5 of us have everybody's in their own tent, and sitting inside a tent in that kind of heat is not. It doesn't help that much.
Yeah,
so basically, we were switching off between taking dips and getting back to the tent every 5 minutes.
So I mentioned back at the Endoric Basin that was mentioned in Wikipedia, and that is the Great Basin.
Yeah,
that's where it is, and there's so little water there that the Divide really doesn't include it. It just splits it and returns it.
Yeah.
So we slugged away for a whole nother day at this. Got up again at 3 the next morning and got rolling, and we finished much more like noon that day and had one of the awesome meals of all time.
So I don't know if you can tell by our faces, but this was payoff. we could not eat enough food
There was,
at that
and there
meal.
was a real palpable sense of relief. It's like, thank God, the Great
Yeah.
Basin is behind us.
Yeah.
It was a glorious feeling. And from there, it turned into, once again, this beautiful rolling stuff that is, well, in this case, it was a very super, we're getting towards Colorado, and this very super high speed, oh, come on, baby, do it for me. No, that's not it. It might not work. No, okay. So these big, huge descents that go on forever, like 25-mile descent that drops you 5,000 feet of vertical, all on a very rough road. And it's just, it's thrilling, it's exhausting, and it's thrilling. And we get to the base of this thing, down to the Colorado River,
Yeah.
and there's this little town of Radium, and there's supposed to be, as the map indicates, a store in Radium. And this is what we find.
And there was, and we roll up, and this guy behind a fence says, "So I'll open the store for you if you spend $12."
It was
so-
hard to spend $12 at this store.
And so, and you look at the cabinet. That's what they had. It was, but it was worth it. And we met this guy. His name was Radium Joe, and we sat on the front porch with him. And he was a character.
I think we
You're
have
not even
lost
getting-
Radium
you're not even getting Radium
Joe.
You're not even
We've
getting.
lost the last two.
You, Steve.
Oh, there's
There's
Radium
Radium
Joe.
Joe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this guy was one of two residents of Radium, a town of two. So that was all the story they needed.
He said he was the luckiest man in the world to live
Yeah,
there too.
couldn't-
You know.
He used to run a rafting company, but now had kind of given up on it and just living out his days here.
Yeah.
Then, I don't know if this is going to let me get here. Come on.
Is it not?
We're not advancing. Hold on a second. This is called ad-libbing. See if I can get it to do this. Yeah, we are locked up. Hold on a second here. Jesse, have you got any thoughts?
Jesse?
In the little device here. I'm not getting the computer to do it either.
Hey, Bob, can you talk about your saddles while we're waiting for this?
Talk about what? Excuse me?
Saddles? You both ride Brooks saddles?
Oh no, this is not a Brooks saddle. It's a different one. I believe it's called Selly Anatomica, but it's leather, and it worked really well. Yeah, no break-in. Yeah.
How many miles did you average per day?
We averaged 40 to, a big day was 60 miles. But a typical day was 40 to 50 miles.
Interesting, the shortest day was probably 23 miles. Longest day was 86 miles.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, if you look at the map out in the lobby, you can see it, the distance between the pins. And,
Look.
well, see, I'll let Jesse.
Is that Jesse?
And it was, there were some guidebooks that helped you try to predict what you were going to do, and we would hit some of those guidebooks and think, oh, wait, it says you're only going to go 23 miles today. I thought, oh, that's not right. And then realized, no, they're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's,
No, they knew what they were talking about.
that was
Yeah,
it. It was very,
absolutely.
very, very hard to get there. Any other questions, as long as we're
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start the trip,
August 2nd.
and you were doing the Great Basin when?
I can't tell you. I can't remember that. Yeah, the dates, believe me, this is part of the experience here, is you really quickly lose
It would have been early September.
dates. Yeah.
Early September.
Yeah.
Ever any confusion about which way to go?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have on,
We had a
like
GPS.
on my bike here,
Yeah.
I have a device that I carry, and it's a Garmin, and it's an E-Trex, and it's kind of interesting. It's very low tech, and the reason it's the low tech and you choose it is it runs on AA batteries. And when you're out there on the trail, you can buy bags of AA batteries, but you can't often find a place to plug a USB connection in.
Yeah, that's what mine
So you
was,
live
so.
on this very odd way of like these simple things.
We also had maps too. The Adventure Cycling puts out a set of maps, and they put out a GPS map as well.
Yeah.
A digital map.
Choose that start date.
There are two ways, that's a good question. There are two ways to do this. You're trying to deal with it being too hot in the south and too cold in the north. Funny, the way it worked out for us, because we had some unusual weather conditions, it proved to be too hot in the north and too cold in the south when we went through. But that was a pretty unusual situation.
Yeah, a lot of people start earlier. In fact, there is a race on this route that starts several weeks before we started, and they're
Oh, there's
typically
Harold.
in snow all the time.
Yeah. In fact, we have,
Here we go. We're back to.
oh, okay.
There we go.
Do you have a sense of how many people do this every year?
Thanks, Jesse. We have Harold on the
You know,
phone.
I
if you wanna-
don't. I
can see the
don't.
picture if you wanna
But
contact
just to
him and
give
say
you a
we
feel
had
for
tech
how many
help.
people we would bump into on a daily basis, we would see 1 to 3 groups of riders a day. And the types of folks, I would say, we thought we would be out of the norm at our age, but there were quite a few people that were riding it that were our age.
Bob, let's skip ahead here. We're gonna. So this comes to a crucial part of the ride, and you can see we're right west of Denver, and we go to a town, the town of Silverthorne.
Oh, we missed you.
We did, yeah.
Okay.
We have to roll.
All right. All right.
It,
So we ended up here in Silverthorne, and prior to this, I had been having a hard time with the altitude. I wasn't sleeping well at night, and I could tell that I was sort of fading slowly, but I didn't want to draw much attention to it, and I thought I'd be fine. But the second night that we were in Silverthorne, it all sort of hit the fan for me, and I had a really tough night with nausea and diarrhea, and that following morning, we decided to go to urgent care, and I was diagnosed with acute mountain sickness, and it was pretty apparent at that point that I needed to stop. And it was funny because before this I hadn't even thought about stopping, but it was so evident when this happened, because after this point, the trip, as Bruce will follow up here for the rest of the talk, the route got more remote and higher elevations.
It was pretty clear Bob was struggling. We took him to urgent care. They had one look at him as he was lying on the lobby floor of the, and said, "Why don't you come back here?" And they put a bag of saline into him, which his body sucked up in less than 2 minutes. And they said, "Oh, let's do that again." And they he had 2 liters of saline with him in him within 5 minutes, and they realized, uh-oh, this is a problem. Now, the
when
tough,
they weighed me, I had lost 20 pounds.
Yeah.
At that point on the trip.
and
Yeah.
it was sort of it was a difficult point, because it's like I thought, well, I will just go home with Bob, but as we talking with the doctor and so on, and Bob and I've done a lot of stuff together. And every time we've been at altitude, Bob struggles. It's just some people's physiology doesn't deal with altitude. Bob's is not so good at that. We've gone skiing together at Vail and so on. You have the same thing, these sleep apneas. And so we realized that, we talked about it, and we thought, no, if I'm ever going to finish this ride, I'm not going to do it with Bob. And so we thought, well, if I go home now, fortunately, Bob's nephew lived nearby and could come and get Bob and deliver him to his sister's house in Denver.
In Denver, it was pretty convenient.
So I realized that this is it. So I decided, okay, we both thought about it. It's like, let's press on.
Yeah.
This next photograph is a complicated image. This is one Bob took out of the car of me waving goodbye
as
to
I'm
him.
leaving. Yeah.
And the look in my face sort of says it all. I'm worried. I'm very worried for Bob. I'm sort of worried what's going to happen to me. I am tired. It is a concern, and yet part of me is also relieved that Bob is being taken care of. It was clear that he was struggling with something as the days went by. So I've never had such a strange mix of feelings in my life.
Yeah.
So I text ahead to Harold, because in keeping touch with him, I know he's about 2 days ahead of me. I did not want to ride alone, and he said, I'll wait for you. And he was delayed a little bit, so off I went. And I got to just these unbelievably spectacular spots where this is the most remote thing I saw in the entire trip. And as Bob will say, you'll notice there's no barbed wire here. There are these funky little trailers that some of the cowboys who are out tending will stay in these trailers. And it's just,
Yeah.
I dashed to get to this place called Hartzell, where the map said that there was a cyclist-only campground, which was behind the town bar. And
This is downtown camping.
This
here.
was Saturday night. And so I camped, and then I got up in the morning, and I stuck my head out of the tent and waited for everyone to get into church before I actually got out of the tent, because I didn't look that good. And then got on my bike again and made a dash for
That's
the
just
town I'm going to meet Harold in.
I love that photograph. That's just classic.
And that really that captures it. If what riding the high plains is like, it's like that. So I do catch up to Harold, and Harold has waited for me. And at that time, we had met another young rider, Corey Evans. This is a 27-year-old woman who's riding the Divide alone. She's just out there alone. And it turns out that she was one of many solo riders we met.
Oh, yeah, we've met a bunch of soul riders.
About equally
yeah.
men and women
Yeah.
who we spent an afternoon picking gravel out of a 72-year-old woman's leg who had crashed. She was riding alone. It's an incredibly tough group of people out
Yeah.
there. I was really impressed. Corey, independent. She just said, we said, do you want to camp on our same campground tonight? And she said, no. So we rode along, and we found this group of 3 couples that gave us dinner and entertained us that night. It was just absolutely magical. So she wanted to be alone, and we found these great people, and it was just a delight. The very next day, we are moving again, and this time, Harold and I are riding towards a town called Del Norte, as they call it, Del Norte. And this was maybe the most elated ride I had the entire time. It felt like it rained the whole way, and it felt like the Scottish Highlands to me, going through these little canyons and then out in these big, broad plains. And it all finally delivered us down to, I'm racing a little here to catch up to this little town of Del Norte. And Del Norte was having its homecoming parade. This was a first of a couple of different American firsts for Harold, showing him what this country's about. He had no homecoming. What is homecoming? And so we're standing there on our way to do our laundry, and we're watching the parade, and then a person goes by.
So
on
how
a
did
car.
Harold respond to this?
Well, Harold said, "What is that, Bruce?" And I said, "That's the homecoming queen." Homecoming queen. And then
This wouldn't work in Norway, you know.
And then we waited a couple minutes more, and then another homecoming queen went by. And then a couple of minutes more, and another homecoming queen. I will cut to the chase here, but 8 or 9, I lost count, homecoming queens went by. And then I thought about this. Del Norte is a town of 1,400 people. So in that category, woman in the 9th to 12th grade, I figured you have about a 1 out of 5 chance of being the homecoming queen.
That's right.
This would be a dream for some women and a horror for others, I realize. So Del Norte was a surprise, and it was a real indication that they're doing wonderfully in some towns. Some towns are just thriving. They're doing great. This gets to a difficult spot for me and Harold on this trip, and that is the next day is the kind of day that when you're on one of these trips, you're always looking forward to. It's the big day. It's kind of like when Tour de France riders get to Alpe d'Huez or something like that, where it's like, this is the big climb. This is the one that's going to really wipe you out. And if you like bike riding, you like these kinds of things. This was going to be a 12,000-foot pass, followed by 3 more passes in the 11,500-foot area. And this was going to be a big day. And I got up, I was excited, and I realized I can't eat breakfast. I can't get any breakfast down. And we're rolling already, so I go, and I thought, this is not going to work. So I get about 3/4 of the way up Indiana Pass, and I just turned to Harold and said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And so I just crashed into the woods about noon. And I said, Harold, just go on, go on. We had a place to stay that night, and just keep going. And he said, no, I'll stay with you. And so he crashed somewhere nearby. I went in my tent at noon, and I didn't come out until like 7 o'clock the next morning. And I realized I was in real trouble. And Harold made me what he calls oat in the morning. And another.
This is a GI issue.
This is a GI issue.
Yeah.
And I'm in bad shape, but we're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So Harold nursed me over the next 4 passes. And he stuck with me the whole time, helped me. I had to walk a good chunk of the way. I probably walked 20, 30 miles that day with my bike, which is kind of a hard thing to do. And he was just there. But we made it. We made it to this little town of Platoro. And this was fantastic. Here is me trying to get up, while I still could, a picture of riding up Indiana Pass, which was beautiful. And so depressing to suddenly realize I can't carry on. And then we get to Platoro, and maybe you recognize these guys.
And
this
I believe
is Sue Trevathan and Jim. Hang on a
And
second,
Jim
Bob.
and Sue are in the audience, right? So can they stand up?
Can you guys stand up and? Hey, Bob.
Just want to thank you guys for helping Bruce out. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a savior. The ride would have ended completely for me. And they were there. They let us crash at their place for 3 days. Harold chopped wood, and I lay in this bed. I don't know, do you notice something here in this
I
photograph,
believe
Bob?
those pills are the pills that I gave you, right?
Yeah, so when we squared up in Silverthorne, Bob said, what of my stuff do you want? I said, I'll take the first aid kit. And lying in bed, I suddenly realized, Bob's this kind of guy. He's prepared. I'll bet you he has Giardia medication. And he did. So I got taking that, and he had, in fact, 2 doses, or 2 full prescriptions of Giardia meds, which comes into the story soon. So I took those, and I was back on my feet in really just a couple of days. Sue and Jim, really, guys, thank you so much. They would drag me out of bed once a day and drag me up to this kind of lookout spot over the town of Platoro, which is this absolutely idyllic mining town. And we would look out over and rest up a little bit. And in 3 days, I got strong enough, although I didn't really want to go, we moved on. And the next day was this incredibly beautiful descent down to this little town of Horka, through some of the best aspen viewing or fall viewing, and I'm from New England, that I've ever seen in my life.
It's getting pretty cold now, isn't it, too?
It is, yeah. The nights are in the teens, although the days never really warm up. We had a lot of days, like back in Radium, where it would be teens in the morning and 95 in the middle of the afternoon. And now we're lucky to get it to 55, and it's cold in the morning. And we ride to this little town of Horka, and Horka has this kind of sort of a one store and one RV park, and that's the whole deal. And I can't express how remote this is. This is nowhere by nowhere. And I walk into the store looking for something to eat, and this is the store. This is the
Arriving in
Christmas
Leavenworth.
tree shop.
Yeah.
And people drive way out of their way to go to the RV park, and then the entertainment is to go to the store and buy ornaments or something like that. And so we walked in there and said, do you have something to eat? And there's a guy in the front porch, and it's kind of hard to tell whether he was a real man or just an animatic kind of thing. He said, do you have anything to eat? Yes, we've got 17 kinds of pies. So am I making this up, Jim? And it's like, well, what's your store here? He's like, 7 rooms of treasure.
Did you get an ornament?
I didn't get an ornament, but I could tell Harold and I really needed some sustenance, so I said, well, we need something besides pie, and he said, we have corn dogs. So we got Harold another American first, his first corn dog. Yeah. Harold had 2 corn dogs that day. This was the start of a very, very long pass, and right up to the border of Colorado and New Mexico. And this is where the whole game changes. Everything gets very, very hard here. Let me show you a quick little clip here. This is right up on the border. This is about 11,000 feet. Let's see if we can get you these guys. Do you have volume on this up there? It's ridiculous. Which in the rainbow is arcing the divide too. This is the divide, the border. And we had time, thank you, to sort of consider life here in a big way. And we climbed into our tents, and this is what it looks like when you are at about 11,000 feet and the moon is out. And I just have never had such a sense of loneliness. To give you kind of a feeling here, if you took one of these tents, let's take one of these tents, and take that tent and put it right up to the very crest of the room here, like take your eyes and push it all the way up there, and then take that distance from here to there and multiply it by over 250 up into the night sky. And you're just up there, utterly alone. It's just totally remote. And you're in this little tent. And there is this, so a lot of you are familiar with the coyotes on the island here, and you can hear like 20 or 30 coyotes screeching along in the middle of the night. It's kind of beautiful. I would say there were several hundred coyotes at this place. And you could just hear them all night long, screeching away. And they're very close to you. And you realize there's no danger, but it is this unbelievably powerful feeling of like, what is this place really? This comes to tip number 7. And this is an important one. Like when we rode from coast to coast, it was about riding from Gloucester, Massachusetts, where my mom lived, to Vashon Island, where all our friends and family lived. And when you're on the divide, we thought we were riding from Canada to Mexico, another point-to-point destination. And about here, you realize this is not what this is about. It just isn't about that. The divide, tip number 7, is the divide is not about getting somewhere. It's about being there. It's the comfort of being in between huge forces, huge things. On the divide, you realize it's so vague where it is, and that gravity is pulling, the biggest of all the 4 forces in the universe. It's pulling stuff one way and pulling stuff the other, and you can't really tell where you are. You're just in this lonely little spot with this huge, immense feeling. And we realize that there's this wild sense of limbo in this, and that the divide is like a lot of things in life. So I thought maybe we should see if we can call up Harold and see if we can get his take on this whole thing.
There he is.
Yeah. I think we'll lose that, and it'll take a second for it to, there we go. Harold, how are you?
Hey, Harold.
Hello, Bruce. Hi, Bob.
Hey there.
Good to see you.
Good
to see
you
you.
too. Yeah.
Where's the picture from behind you? Where's that from?
Are we connected?
Yes, we are connected. Yeah, you go ahead. You can talk on, Harold. They can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice to see. It's good morning, everyone. It's early in the morning here in Norway. It's 5 o'clock actually, but I never say nay when Bruce asked me to participate, because to talk about this fantastic trip is that's just a joy. And
Hey, Harold.
and, a great pleasure to travel together with Bruce and Bob, and especially Bruce, for 3 weeks. And we had such a good time together.
Harold, can you describe why does everyone call you King Harold, and are you cool with that?
And that's quite funny, because I got this nickname, as you probably have understood. I'm not the king in Norway. I got this nickname because I presented myself in the beginning of the trip as, my name is Harald, as the king in Norway. And this lady called Kim, she immediately took this as a nickname, and and it followed me for the rest of the trip in the Great Divide. And that's interesting because actually the Great Divide is a community, people traveling this stretch, and we met so many people and separated and met again, and all along the way, I was called King Harold. That's quite funny, actually.
In fact, when we started talking about this presentation tonight, I admitted that, or I wrote in a couple places that we would try to contact King Harold, and a couple of friends of mine thought, oh, I was really talking about the King of Norway. And they realized this is much more august to be talking to you, Harold.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. So, Harold, tell us a little bit about what you remember from that night up with the rainbow and the cows and all that stuff. What did that mean to you?
Yeah, that was actually a fantastic night. I remember we crossed the border to New Mexico and put up our tents in the meadow area, and lots of cattle grazing and mourning. We had this beautiful rainbow making a half circle, perfect half circle, and this was really a very special atmosphere there. But what I remember most was the morning after, actually, when you and me, Bruce, had the talk. And then we just realized that, okay, and reflecting, what is this Great Divide tour all about? And we realized that, okay, this is our last day, and soon we will be at the border. And maybe the most important thing is not to reach the border, but to be present in the moment. And we also talked about this, to not make it too easy for yourself. And that's also, I think, I realized some very important things in life, and that's when you just make decisions in life, you shouldn't make it too easy. And all the struggles we have when we climbed all the passes, and that makes us make very good memories, actually. So we had a very good talk that morning, actually.
We
Bruce.
did. Yeah, that was, and we refer to it again and again as the days went by. It meant a lot to me. I love the fact that you talked about, it's like, Harold had just retired before the trip, and he said, this way or that way. It's a little bit like, should I retire? Shouldn't I retire? So these big things in life that you do. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? And you realize it's okay to be in limbo. Just be in the middle. Just be there and just be present to that moment. Harold, it's good to see you, my friend.
It's great to see you, Harold.
Harold's just getting back from a bike trip in the Atlas Mountains south of Morocco. So that's...
Yeah. How was that trip, Harold? How was the trip to Morocco? Was it good?
I think maybe we
I don't know that we've...
Yeah. Harold, we're going to say
I don't think he
goodbye.
can hear us.
Good luck to you, sir.
Okay, yeah. So good luck.
All right.
Quite a character, Harold.
He's the most optimistic person I think I've ever met in my life. He really made things happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to keep clipping here, see if this will work. Good. All right, so Harold and I are now moving ahead, and New Mexico proves to be the hardest part of the Great Divide by far. I was not expecting this. I was a little shocked when I talked to Harold as we entered, right by that cow scene, and he said, "Oh, Bruce, you have to know that the New Mexico part is only 7 miles shorter than Montana." It's like, oh, God, you're kidding. This is a land where people don't have cell phones, or if they do, they don't use them. This is a life without cell phones out here. And we got up, this is us camping out, and the next morning we get up, and our campsite is now in the middle of a cattle drive. And this is before the cows completely surrounded the tents, where we realized, oh, we got to move. We got to get out of the way here. And we thought, gee, we're kind of on private land. Are they going to be upset? But no, they just couldn't have been more open. They couldn't have been more happy with us. We meet this guy. So if you were a young cattleman what name would be better for you than Bo Temple? That's Bo Temple. And just a young guy, he runs from 300 to 400 cows. This is his run that he was doing. And he has a couple of helpers with him and lives this really kind of wild, down-to-earth life. And here are a couple of his cowboys. Harold was so thrilled to, I meet real cowboys.
All the cowboys look like ZZ Top, right?
And they all have blue heelers.
Yeah.
Let's see, where am I here? Yeah. So, let me get back here. The next place we get to is the Navajo Reservation. Flat, difficult riding, really beautiful. And we get to this place called the Chaco Trading Center. And this is really an interesting place to spend a night. There was in the middle of this huge desert is this tiny little food store. And they said, you can go pitch your tent next to that boxcar out there. There are no tracks anywhere. This is a boxcar from nowhere. And they said, kind of hide behind the boxcar. And it's like, oh, okay. And they said, now you can see there's a little chain link fence off to the left. He said, now we're going to lock you in here tonight. And there's barbed wire all around you. And it was hard to know what was really going on here. Was this like a racist comment? What was this? And the folks, the Navajo people that were running this place were so nice to us and so helpful to us, but it really gave us a sense of like the challenges that was ahead for them. That this is a place where everyone who doesn't have power comes to do their wash, get their mail, get internet connection if they have a phone. One of the great problems is where to get food. And this is one of the few supplies of food. And you can see I've got my $4 can of peaches or pears there. And very glad to have those at this point. Food is a real problem out here, and this is nowhere by nowhere. Then, this is, I think, going to be kind of loud. We'll see what happens here. Our next stop is, this is Route 66 in a little town of Grants. And it is not a wonderful place. When we're here, we are stuck in a constant rainstorm. It is just perpetually raining. Now you remember Hurricane Ian that plowed through Florida and did so much damage, that it brought this trail of meteorologic disturbances that just sat on New Mexico for a couple of weeks, for several weeks. Like the big balloon festival in Albuquerque was canceled, things like that. And this is where Harold and I entered the scene. And we realized that, can we keep going? Can we actually keep pushing down the trail? And a guy who we'd been riding with, who was going to go test the trail, he was trying to get to Albuquerque to just head home. He had it. He sent us this photograph.
This is typical peanut butter. It was described as peanut butter. Yeah. And
you can see where it takes the chain off your bike. It explodes your derailleur. Your wheels simply won't go through the fork anymore, and you can't get there. So we decided plan B. We took one look at this. Harold looks at me and says, Bruce, I think you are thinking what I'm thinking. And we said, well, let's switch to the highways. So we found all these little roads we could ride. And it was, as you can see here, we're just riding between rainstorms. We're just, one rainstorm to another. And the land is absolutely saturated. There's just water everywhere. So there's really no way to camp anywhere. Everything is just going to be soaking wet. On top of this, I mentioned that there were 2 prescriptions I got from Bob. Harold is now sick, and he has Giardia. And we are trying hard to get him to as close to a big city where he can eventually get home. And he'd ride about 20 miles, and he'd lie down on the side of the road and say, 10 more minutes, Bruce. And then he'd get up, and we'd ride on some more. Harold's a very, 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 very tough guy. But we eventually do get, let's see, about halfway down New Mexico, and something very fortunate happens to us. We're sort of thinking, this is probably over. We're probably going to have to evacuate Harold, and we just don't know if this is actually going to come to pass. And the forecast is for another, 10 days of rain. And what are we going to do? And then we come into this very important place. This is a little motel we stop at. And as you can see here, it's raining, and it's still raining. And we're pushing our bikes outside, and we're sort of thinking like, okay, here we go again. Just brace, just put on your gear. We're just going to ride into this. And before we push out the door, this woman walks up behind me. And her name proves to be Anastasia Marie. And she just walks up behind us, and we go, oh, sorry. She goes, oh, I am housekeeping. And she's from Russia. And most people, when they see us, they say the same things. They always ask the same questions, like, where are you going? Where are you from? Are you cold? Are you tired? And Anastasia Marie asked us the most unusual question. She looks at me and says, what are you going to use your energy to manifest today?
So instead of where are you going, it was why are you going?
I guess
Basically,
so.
right.
And it was just this, it just left me cold. And she's looking at me like, are you? And we were like, well, I'm not sure what you mean. And we talked about it a while. And she said, how are you going to do it? And we talked, well, it's raining, we're getting tired. She goes like, yeah, you are mostly water. And it's like, that's a good point. And we talked to her about making watercolors. It's like you're painting in water. And it's like, so it's hard, but you do it, and you can make this good. And she described working, doing this stuff, and how she was adopted 20 years ago from Russia as she was a 17-year-old and raising a kid, and it had not been an easy path. And she was so pleasant. She was so thoughtful that we just, all of a sudden, our spirits lifted. And what seemed like it was just not going to work, all of a sudden realized, no, it's going to work. In fact, it's going to work really well. So we push off into the rain, and we stopped shortly, and Harold and I have this conversation.
How's the riding today, Harold?
Oh, it's very good.
No.
Yeah,
It's a keeper.
maybe wet, but I enjoy it.
Me too.
That's classic Harold. He would describe what we were doing as joy in motion, regardless of how difficult the situation was.
So
Just
tip
incredible.
number 8 for riding the divide is use your energy to manifest today.
At about this time of the trip, I was trying to follow you from Vashon, and I was getting all these cryptic texts from you, and I wasn't sure whether you were going to be continuing or stopping.
We had decided, after talking to Anastasia Marie, we realized, oh yeah, we can do this. And so we rode on, but Harold and I got to this town, Silver City, which could have been 2 or 3 days to the end, and all of a sudden, it looked like there was sun. Harold was in trouble. He was really sick, and he had to stop for a while. I had a closing window of my ride that was going to pick me up at the border was going to be there in 2 days. And I thought, this may or may not be possible. And I was torn. Harold had lots of extra days before his flight back to Norway. So we realized if we can get him to Silver City, he can just recover in some motel and get stronger and then make a go at the border. Or I could just press on. And it was a mixed feeling because part of me thought, I'm fine. I've been on the divide. I've been part of the divide. And then I realized it's like, I am so desperate to get back into the desert again and to see the desert. So I decided, we left Harold at the Drifter Motel, and then I ride on into the desert, finally in sunshine. And you can see here that the path is actually starting to dry out a little bit. And I still didn't know if this was going to be possible, but I got to within about 50 miles of the border, and I found a place to camp, and I got to sleep in the desert one more night. That's actually me in the morning, and I'm having my breakfast of mashed potatoes, gravy, and canned chicken, which was a constant meal for us. Yep. And then I got on the bike, and I realized that I still can get there. So this last day was absolutely one of the most magic days of my life. This impossible long corridors, these alleys between these ridges. I end up getting to the very farthest ridge between the 2 ridges that are closest to you. You can see a little ridge of mountains. That's kind of where the border is. And I'm riding along there, and I saw some little friends at the same time. there are a lot of tarantulas, big tarantulas, movie tarantulas there. And comparing them, these little creatures, to this huge open expanse just made everything seem huge. And I had a very odd experience. I looked down at my meter, the one on the right, and that's the Garmin I've been using. And I've been following, Bob and I have been following this little red line. And the little red line all of a sudden just stops. And it had failed a couple times on the trip, and just kind of like the slide projector, you scramble around, you fix it so you don't get lost. And I'm thinking, oh, come on, this is the last day, I'm within the last 20, 30 miles, and it's like all of a sudden it fails. It's like, not now. And then it suddenly dawns on me, it's like, wait, that's it. That's the end. I'm there. And I look up, and there's this beautiful sight of these hills and clouds. And then I suddenly realize,
What's the black line there?
what is this black line slicing across here? This is the wall.
Yeah.
And it is, I won't get political on this, but it is so depressing. Wherever you are on this, it doesn't matter what your politics would be. You get this beautiful landscape, and all of a sudden there's this big line across the horizon. And it gets bigger and bigger, although I'm told by the locals there that it doesn't go past that hill. It stops right there. So I press down, and I get the picture that everyone's supposed to get. And everyone's like, you must be so elated to be at the border. Not really. I felt like I'd been on the divide. I did not need the border to add to that. It felt good, but it's like, that was fine. And then I turned around, and I looked back up, and then I watched the guy close up the gate, and it was 4 o'clock now, and I had a number of hours to wait. And this guy closed up the gate, and then he disappeared, and he wouldn't talk to me. And I thought, this is so cold. This whole thing is just so mean and cold. And then about, I don't know, an hour later, he shuffles out again, and he's got a bag. And he sort of motions to me. He's like, and so I kind of shuffle across the street with him. And then I said, yeah, what's, he's like, microphones out here. And it's like, okay. And he says, just, it's like, there's a camera. There's a camera out here. So we shuffle across the street, way across the street, and then he finally says, you know, this isn't the border I used to work at. This is, we used to invite all you guys in and get you ice cream and so on, and now it's against the rules. I can't do that. So I brought you a couple beers instead.
Did he talk about the wall at all, or did he?
He didn't just stay non-political. His name is Tim.
Yeah.
He's a really wonderful guy, loves his dogs. And then at this point, I realized that I have a bunch of time left. And I sat down, and the evening was coming, and I talked with Bob and Jeff for the radio program.
Show, yeah. And
we had a great last phone call. And this is me looking north, and it's this sort of magical time where, and I realized, like, this is just very impressive. I kind of thought, looking up there, it's like, what, you know, is there a takeaway from this whole experience? This is so big. And then I thought, yeah, there's definitely a takeaway. And of course, this is something I've always known. You have too. And I used to know this better when I was a kid, and I just always forget this. I just keep forgetting this thing. But it's really nice to go to a place like this and be on this trip and remember it. And that is, this whole thing is, it's just not about getting somewhere. Like Harold said, it's just about being where you are and trying to be present to it and trying to hang on to stuff that makes memories last, that are part of you. And the Divide is absolutely unbeatable for that. It was just fantastic for that. So picture me sitting in this stupid little chair, that thing here, for hours. My legs are totally asleep. I can't possibly stand up. And looking north, and I'm thinking about this wild array of people, these characters that we'd met, the adventures Bob and I had had, and the worries that now I'm really relieved that Bob is better. On the phone call, he sounded good, and I realized that's over. I don't have to worry about that. And it's all good now. And then I go back to thinking about this notion of the divide and these big forces, and that you're just in the middle, and you're just floating there. And you're not worried about whether you're going to get to the end of something, You're not planning about the next day other than the simple things about where I'm going to eat or something. It's just being utterly, I hear this a lot, be present to the moment and so on, but it seemed bigger than that. It was just this immensity of I'm just in this huge space with these huge forces, and I'm completely relieved. I'm completely relieved to be here. So we've been back Bob's been back for about 6 months. I've been back for about 5 months. And every night, I'm back on the trail. I just play in my head, someplace on the trail. I'm present to it. Do you do that?
Yeah, I do.
It's
maybe not every night, but yeah.
And then during the day, often if I just got a moment, or I'm just looking out, over the harbor where we live, I'm sort of back there into this kind of big. I don't worry about what's coming next. I'm just absolutely present, and I realize that if I need to, I can go back to this place, like Union Pass, that spectacular spot, or this, and I can get that all. But I don't need to, because I'm much more aware of all that stuff right here on Vashon. It's all very much more a part of my life, and that brings me a lot of peace. And that's the takeaway. That's why this thing is worth doing.
Yep.
I want to thank you, Bud, for dragging me along on this thing. You can't believe how good it is to have an adventuring buddy like you. This makes a huge difference.
It was a treat for me as well. Absolutely. Thank you. And I was happy to see you finish it, whether you were happy to finish it or not. It was good for me to see you complete the trip.
I also want to just mention there was somebody who contacted us a lot on the trip and has exchanges with, and he's not with us now. So a quick memory out to Martin Baker.
Yeah, absolutely. Good thought.
He understood this whole feeling. It was just this vastness. And this
He was following our
presence
trip
and so on.
too. Yeah, pretty close.
All right, so one last thought, and then this will make the evening. And that is, eventually, my niece does get there, and it's a little dark, but she picks me up, and we head north, and we drove through the night, and we stopped in Tucson. It's a cheap motel kind of thing. And the next morning, we got rolling again, early in the morning, and already life seemed different. It's like I could sense things picking up, the pace increasing, and so on. And then I saw a really good friend, a really close buddy out on the highway. And it was such a relief to look over and see this pal. And that made me think of, oh, this is the last tip. This is Tips of the Trail number 9. Oops.
You can't beat a concrete toilet. Absolutely. That's it.
We'd be happy, I realize some people are going to have
Yeah,
to go,
it's
but
getting
we'd be
late.
happy to take questions. You can
Yeah.
raise the room lights a little bit there, Jesse, and we happy to take any questions. Sorry we're running a little over just because we had some glitches there, but I think we're rolling. Yeah, David.
Hey, Richard. So, a year and a half ago, is this on? Okay. A year and a half ago, you rode these bikes on the Idiot Ride, Passport to Pain, right?
Yes.
So,
It was a bad idea.
it's a bad idea. So,
Yeah.
your hardest physical day on this ride compared to those 80 miles, 10,000 foot on Vashon.
I would say riding this bike, an Idiot Ride, it's pavement compared to the hard.
Yeah,
that would be
it's-
like riding the weenie compared to the hardest day, which would be more like the Idiot plus a bunch.
Yeah, the road conditions were huge, just in terms of what we were riding on.
Like the
Not
day.
so much the distances, but the conditions. Yeah.
Some of these days were much, much, much harder than P2P. Much harder.
Okay, thank you. You gonna finish it, Bob?
Am I going to finish the ride? No.
I think,
No.
David, the point I want. This is a really
I
important.
don't really have a desire to, and I think I realize too that that the altitude was really, that was tough for me, and I don't really have feel the need to do that
This
again.
this is an important thing you're bringing up here. That first of all, it was clear Bob struggles with altitude. There's no point. He's not going to be happy at 12,000 feet. I know that. But did Bob somehow miss out on something? He missed out on more of the divide, but he did not miss out on the divide experience. He has every bit the experience I had and the benefits of the divide, even though he was out there less time. It's the same thing, and that's the point. It was not about getting somewhere. Yeah, I do have that one dumb photo of me standing at the Antelope Wells gate, but that's trinket.
Did you guys at any point run out of water?
Yes.
Dish. What happened?
Oh, dish. Yes, the dog dish. It was hard. You struggle. Probably the reason I had Giardia was it's cattle country everywhere. There are cows everywhere. You can't believe where the cows get to. And you're riding, your front wheel's riding through things. And I had a spare bottle that I keep, this one here. And I'm riding along, and the front wheel is spraying the bottle, and I'm so desperate that I took a couple swigs out of it. And I'm sure that's it.
And you probably really didn't realize that till after.
Right.
After,
I figured that out once I was sick.
And that was probably
how
exactly how Harold got it as well.
Yeah. We filter the water. We were scrupulous about that. So it's, that kind of thing.
There were some pretty dicey spots that we were picking up water and purifying it. I mean, ditches and, culverts under roads. And
So,
there we go.
so tell
Yeah.
us about the black shit that came out of your tires and got all over your bike and your chain.
Oh, so
the tubeless,
I was
yeah.
unaware of this technical advancement, which is now commonplace. But the idea, you're talking about puncture or self-sealing tires. And so as a road rider, that was now self-healing tires are part of the road game. But at that point, they weren't. And in gravel bikes and mountain bikes, your tires self-seal. So you put, literally, it's latex. You pour it in. You literally pour it in through the valve stem and fill your tire with, a couple inches of this stuff. And as you're riding, we were getting several flats a day.
Several flats.
And if the flat is big enough, a lot of the latex comes out before it can heal
it
itself.
would be all over your frame. You could see the.
And it would get on your derailleur so that that's where I could tell all of a sudden, it's like, the front derailleur's not shifting anymore. And I realized it's just full of latex. We had one particular morning in Abiquiu, New Mexico, and I'm just wheeling the bike from the place we stayed out to the highway. I'm just rolling out to the highway, and I look down, and there are all these things that I think are called goat heads, these little things. And so I realized I'd pull them out, and in 100 yards, I've got 8 flats. And these all would have been tire emptying flats before that technology. It totally changed things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff, you had a question?
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the elevations that you were riding at. We understand that Bob was suffering from it, but you haven't really talked about.
Yeah. So interesting. It starts so this was talk about the elevations of the ride, and the rides at the border at Roosevelt, Montana, is about 2,500 feet. That's it. And as you slowly, you're up and down and up and down. The passes are between 3,000, 4,000 foot gain, but then you lose it, and you roller coaster your way till you get to Colorado. And at that point, you're starting to see the peaks are at 9,000 feet. About 9,500 was the peaks before Silverthorne, and Silverthorne's about 9,000 feet. And then by the time you're getting to southern Colorado, it's getting into the peaks are at 11,000 feet to 12,000 feet, and as we're heading towards Platoro, there's this string of really high. They're all way above 11 and right below 12, and then you slowly work your way back down again to the point where you're at Antelope Wells is about 4,000 feet.
Can you talk more about your art gear and how you stored it and how you kept things safe?
We basically had these notebooks this size, and we had
Little fold-out kits.
And we had little fold-up kits with paintbrushes, and we would typically put this in a Ziploc bag, and we typically stored it in our center frame pack.
We had some supplies were shipped to Sue and Jim, and so that we could pick up fresh supplies there and some paints, and then they took things home. when Scott and Jeff left, they took some things home with them. So we were constantly ferrying stuff back. We'd start off with stuff we didn't need. It's in the camping world, everything has a stuff sack. And then your stuff sacks have stuff sacks. And you begin to realize, well, I'm carrying around 4 pounds of stuff sacks. And so I took all the stuff sacks out and mailed them home.
Well, one of the things that really surprised me about the trip was, because we spent a lot of time researching, how to, what size bags we needed to get. I mean, everything, just to fit everything on a bike, just to get sleeping bags, food, everything. It was a real trick. And I'd say every morning and every evening took a long time to repack or pack the bike. That was a revelation.
Yeah.
And Harold had 2 huge panniers on the back where he could do jump shots into his panniers, and he was done. He was ready to go. So that was probably the best way to do it. In retrospect, for me, I would have done it that way instead. Yeah.
Hey, I was worried about lightning for you guys on that ride. Did you ever have any close calls with lightning?
Before we met Kevin, there was lightning in that canyon, and yeah, it was a worry. My greatest worry about that, though, was flash floods. That it was clear. You looked at the surroundings, and you could see that it has all been scoured out several times. And maybe that kind of storm was regular, but when we looked at it, I thought it was unbelievable.
We were right on the edge of that storm that whole way down the canyon.
Yeah, and then to turn around, it was a canyon that did about a 160 or 180, and we thought we were going to outrun this thing and then do it, and then realize, oh, the other part of the storm is right there. And so we just got nailed. We just absolutely got crushed by it. But did not see the flash floods, but did see the lightning. But lightning was not that was not a constant problem. That was not a worry. The worries were, the preoccupations were bears, but not a worry. It's a funny thing. It's remember when the cougar was on the island? And you'd go walking, and you're just kind of aware there's a cougar out here, and I should just kind of think about that or be aware of that. But are you scared? Well, it's kind of a little unnerving, but it's like you're not scared, and you think, is there really a danger? Am I really going to be attacked by the cougar? You realize, no, you're not going to be attacked. And the bears were like that there were situations like those blind alleys were flying down, we realized that's highly dangerous. But everything else, like seeing if there was a bear like over at the entrance there, I would not be worried about that. Yeah.
Would you consider a mountain bike next time, or do you have
good question.
shocks on your,
Yes.
like on your
Front
stem
shock,
of
not
the-
rear.
What about on the stem of your handlebars?
Well, I have that already.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have it. I don't have it. I've changed seat posts, but I had a shock absorber in the seat post.
Yeah, but the shocks on the front wheels would be a
You
good
would
idea.
do that, and maybe have them locked out. So
Yep.
Yeah, and I would go straight bar, not drops. That was wrong. Everyone
Yeah,
was
both of us felt that way. These drops were kind of wasted
worthless.
for both
Yeah,
of us.
and you were struggling so hard when it gets steep and it's rocky.
Your hands just get totally numb after, especially a lot of the washboard.
The road conditions were, some of it was
Yeah.
much worse than I thought. Much worse than I thought it was going to be. So yeah. The mountain bikers were there, and they were really complaining about it. I'm thinking, what am I doing out here with my 50 pounds of gear and my gravel bike? It's like, nice gravel bike, dude. I know.
But I tell you what, the bikes took so much punishment, and I was just amazed that they took it, really.
High marks.
I mean,
these
yeah.
are both the same brand of bike, which I don't think really matters. But these are just fantastic. Brian up at Vashon Bikes provided both of our bikes. Brian, is Brian chance he's here tonight? Brian actually sold me his bike because one of the big problems was during the first bit of COVID, you couldn't get a bike. All the bikes, remember this? They disappeared. You couldn't buy one. And I wasn't going to ride my road bike. I needed a gravel bike. You simply couldn't find one. And Brian sold me his bike, his personal bike. Yeah.
So I stepped out for a couple of minutes, so you may have already answered this, but what was with the boxcar and the barbed wire?
This was a real puzzle, but they made it really clear. They said you can, you didn't know quite what was the danger. You hear, the big prejudice you hear when you're out on the road is stay off the res. And which is not, we did not stay on, or we stayed on there, or we went through the res a lot. And we never had any problems at all, but there's a super prejudice. It's like bold. And so I couldn't tell whether this particular place, the Chaco Trading Center, was run by a Navajo family. They were very nice to me, incredibly nice to me, and yet they said, stay in here, stay in, and there was barbed wire all around us, and we're locking you in tonight. That was kind of a moment too. It's like, so we're locking you in tonight, please don't go outside the wire, stay in here, night, night, see you in the morning. And it's like, whoa, really? where's the danger? What is it? And you got the feeling it's like we would be robbed or something. And I didn't know whether this was a prejudice or it was so hard to understand. It was very troubling.
I have a question and a half. So my real question is, you didn't talk at all.
Is that Kathy?
It is.
Oh, hi, Kathleen.
My half question was going to be, you talked about your college friend and how gracious and what a Renaissance person they were. I was just curious where you could have gone to college that you had such a wonderful connection in the middle of nowhere.
There's a little school called Colgate, and there's at least one other person. No,
Yeah.
there's several other people in this room that went to Colgate. So, yes.
You guys didn't talk at all about like ATV traffic
Oh,
or
yeah.
trucks or off-road bikes, and I know my impression is there's a lot more sharing the roads. I'm curious, did you have any competition and safety?
A lot of ATVs, yes. In fact, we saw them daily, really.
It depended.
Yeah.
Like when you got south of Colorado, you sort of saw them, but then there'd be times you did and you realized this isn't the right place for them.
At a certain point of the ride, hunting season started. And we never really had a problem with that. It was always something to be aware of, and but there were a lot of hunters with ATVs.
And the hunters were incredibly gracious.
Yeah.
They were very helpful. We had hunters giving us their water. They would see that we were filtering, and filtering is a pain in the neck, but it certainly is important. And they would give us their water, kind of thing. They're very, very, very helpful. Wonderful folks.
Also saw quite a few, well, not quite a few, but several times cowboys with horses, you know.
Anything
other
else?
So what's the next trip?
Yeah, that's what everyone asks. And this is an important bit that Bob and I have done a lot of things together, and a variety of things over the years. And neither one of us are bucket list people. I do not have a bucket list. I don't have any interest in a bucket list. I have things that kind of intrigue me that come along because my heart kind of goes to them, but I don't feel like I've got to get something done. I don't have that sense at all, and I don't think Bob does either. So this was very much Bob's brainchild. It's funny, the cross-country ride was something I came to Bob with and said, I've always wanted to do this. Would you be interested? And Bob actually kind of orchestrated that. And then Bob came to me with the Great Divide and said, how about you and I do this? And he orchestrated that one too. So, all right. Should we call it a night?
Thank you so much. Appreciate everybody coming out.